one right there. Everyone take their seats. Silence your cell phones. This is going to be broadcast on Sirius XM radio. And we certainly want to give the candidates every opportunity to make sure their message is heard. So just be respectful, no hooting and hollering. 2 opportunities to apply. One, after I introduce each of them, so welcome them to New Hampshire, and then at the end of the debate when they're finished, that's when you can apply. Anything else, I think we'll just work out as we go. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to College Convention put forth by New England College here in Manchester, New Hampshire, home of the first in the nation primary. My name is Josh McKelvin. I am going to be moderating this debate between Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips. Thank you both for participating, what you're doing, and throwing your hat in the ring. Quick background. I'm going to introduce Marianne Williamson first. She's a prominent author, public speaker, well known for your message of empowerment and philanthropy. This is actually your second presidential bid, having ran back in 2020, but wound up endorsing Bernie Sanders. You guys just welcomed Marianne Williamson, so let's talk about her opponent, 3-term Minnesota Congressman, Dean Phillips. He is a successful businessman with ventures ranging from a distillery to gelato. That's diverse.
I know what Americans like.
He's father of 2 daughters, married, and is worth noting that he is a Gold Star child. He was 6 months old when his father was killed in Vietnam. We certainly appreciate his service as well. Please welcome Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson once again.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, 90 seconds the candidates will have for an opening statement, and we're going to begin with Congressman Phillips.
Josh, thank you, and hello, conventioneers. I want to thank you all for being here. But I'm going to start by saying the quiet part out loud, and that is Americans want to turn the page from Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I suspect most of you in this room want to turn the page to the future. We all know that. But I don't believe everybody knows that the truth is, if that election happened today between Trump and Biden, Donald Trump wins. It's the truth. Joe Biden has the lowest approval numbers in modern history. He's losing in every battleground state. The last Wall Street Journal poll shows him losing to Donald Trump by 4 points and losing to Nikki Haley by 17 points. So I believe in winning, and I believe the Democrats are sleepwalking into disaster. Why? Because the Democratic Party right now is trying to pursue a coronation instead of a competition. And that is why I celebrate my friend and esteemed colleague here, Marianne Williamson. And why are Americans angry? Why are Americans angry? Well, life is unaffordable. We've got chaos at our southern border, in many cities in our country. We have wars overseas. People are sick of dysfunction and division and nonsense. The lack of common sense in Washington, D.C. And if you're like me, you're probably really disgusted with both parties right now. Really disgusted. And I understand that because I'm one of you. I'm part of the exhausted majority of the United States of America. I'm also a father, I'm a husband, and I'm a Gold Star son. I lost my dad in the Vietnam War in 1969. I'm an entrepreneur, I've led businesses, I chaired the board of the health system, I was a regent at a university, I'm a 3-term member of Congress. I'm the second most bipartisan member of Congress. That includes all the governors, too, by the way.
Got to wrap it up, sir.
And I'm also, I'm sorry?
Almost out of time.
Okay, well, and I'm also a former member of House Democratic leadership. I woke up the morning after the 2016 election. My daughters were in tears. I promised them I would do something. I flipped a district that had been red for 60 years, made it a Democratic district, and now I'm doing the same thing to beat Donald Trump once again. I will beat either one of the GOP nominees. I will return decency and common sense to the White House. I will reduce costs. I will reduce chaos and restore the American dream. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate it. Ms. Williamson, take a few extra seconds if you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm running for president because for the last 50 years, there has been a war on the middle class in this country. In the 1970s, the average American couple could afford a house, they could afford a car, they could afford a yearly vacation. One salary could support a family of 4. One parent could afford to stay home with the children, and they could afford to send their kids to college. That was called a thriving middle class. You cannot have a thriving democracy where there is no thriving middle class. But all that has changed, and that middle class has collapsed. And that was strategized. Over the last 50 years, there has been a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%. So that now a majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. A majority of Americans cannot afford to absorb a $500 unexpected expenditure. 70% of Americans say that they live with chronic economic insecurity and anxiety, bound by the invisible chains of economic stress. And that is the new status quo in America. And that is because the government itself is held hostage by corporations. We are no longer functioning as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Abraham Lincoln said that the men who died at Gettysburg died so that that dream would not perish from the earth, but it is perishing now. We're a government of the corporations and by the corporations and for the corporations. A matrix of corporate overlords that own Washington and control this country. From insurance companies to pharmaceutical companies to big food companies, big agricultural companies, big chemical companies, gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contractors. They have turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery. That status quo, that unholy alliance between government and corporate power will not disrupt itself. It is time for the people to step in.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Appreciate that. Please hold the applause to the end of the debate. Appreciate it. We're going to get to the questions now. We're going to start on election integrity, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump and the claims that he's making. Here in New Hampshire, we've had a controversy recently about ID at the polls or having a residency requirement. Well, the Democrats called that voter suppression on the part of Republicans. You're both campaigning here in New Hampshire. The president's name is not on the ballot. He sent a letter yesterday saying New Hampshire's meaningless. Would you characterize this, Congressman, as voter suppression?
Yes. In fact, I have that letter right here. I hope it goes in the National Archives on display because I think it's one of the most egregious affronts to democracy I've ever seen in my entire lifetime as an American, period. And I'll tell you what's by the way, voter ID, you know, if every American could easily get an ID, that's different. But the fact of the matter, if you are disabled or you are elderly or you live in a rural area where it's really hard, it's nonsensical, so that's voter suppression. But you know what else is voter suppression? What's happening right here. What's happening in Florida, what's happening in North Carolina, what they're trying to do in Massachusetts and other states. The Democratic Party should be investing in democracy, promoting debate, promoting candidates, and promoting voters. What are they doing? They're suppressing them. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm an affable, decent, common sense person that is telling you the truth. I know Marianne knows exactly the same thing, and your generation, all of you in this room, please take note. The parties are destroying democracy, period.
Thank you. Ms. Williamson, same question for you.
Well, what Dean just said is absolutely correct. There is candidate suppression going on here. The DNC has decided and has been very overt about it. Joe Biden would be their candidate. Candidate suppression is a form of voter suppression. Every American should be automatically registered at the age of 18. Voting day should be on Saturday. Voting day should be a holiday. We should be doing everything possible to make it so that every American of voting age has their voice expressed. So any time, any way that there is a way of shutting people down, then that is a danger to our democracy. The political parties traditionally stood behind, they stood in the back, and the people decided who would be the candidate. It should be you, the people of New Hampshire, the people of every other state should decide who is the best Democratic nominee to beat either Donald Trump or Nikki Haley. However, what's going on now is the suppression, shutting down primaries, as Dean was saying. In my case, the invisibilization of my campaign in general, because there's a political media industrial complex. This is not the vision of the founders. There's not supposed to be a political elite or a political class. And let's be very clear. Thomas Jefferson said, the only safe repository for power in the United States is in the hands of the people, not the hands of those guys. And their idea that they've got this, yeah, like they got this in 2016. They don't got this, you do, and we do. Thank you
very much. And that makes three of us, by the way. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the economy. A lot of kids in this room are in college, will be joining the workforce soon. It's got to be a little bit daunting. Big picture, and I know it's hard to summarize in a minute. What's your economic plan so that the next generation can enjoy the same opportunities that we have? Ma'am, please.
I have an economic bill of rights, which was based on an economic bill of rights that was articulated by Franklin Roosevelt. Universal health care, which the majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want, and which is given to the citizens of every other advanced democracy. Universal health care, cancellation of the college loan debt because they should never have existed. Tuition-free college and tech school, also given to the citizens of every other advanced democracy, and which we had in this country until the 1970s. Subsidized child care, paid family leave, guaranteed sick pay, and a guaranteed living wage. Here in New Hampshire, you've still got a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. A living wage in New Hampshire is a $17 an hour living wage. We now have 39% of Americans who report that they regularly skip meals because it's the only way that they can afford housing. We also need a domestic Marshall Plan to repair this country. The way our economy works today, and Washington too often in cahoots with the trickle-down nonsense that causes this unjust economy, is ruining people's lives. And when I'm president, we're going to repair these lives, and we're going to repair our democracy, and we're going to repair our country.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question for you, sir. What's your economic plan?
Well, let me start at birth. I want to start something called the American Dream Accounts, where every single baby born in America starts his or her life with a $1,000 account, can add $500 a year. By the time you're 18 years old and you graduate high school, that money is yours to become an owner of a business, of a home. And if you do some national service for a year after high school, that's another $10,000. I think we've got to be a country from the beginning of our lives until the very end, we take care of people. That also means housing. We are 7 million houses shy in the United States of America. We need to produce, and we can. Healthcare for all. We spend twice as much as any nation in the world. Our outcomes are mid-pack, and we let pharmaceutical companies charge us multiples of anybody in the world. Healthcare for all through Medicare for all. Education for all. Why are we a country that has $1.7 trillion in college debt, costing some of you in this room $90 billion a year? It's nonsensical. And then Social Security towards the end of life. Ensure it exists, if it needs to be amplified, and then most importantly, to create a fund by which those who've been successful can rededicate their Social Security benefits into a pool to share with those who are most vulnerable retirees in America. I sat in North Conway, New Hampshire just a couple weeks ago with two wonderful elderly ladies who make cereal the last 3 nights of the month because they don't have enough Social Security. $100 more a month makes all the difference. That's the kind of country we will be under my presidency.
Thank you, sir. Please. Moving on now to immigration. Obviously, New Hampshire's a ways from the southern border, but it's in our living rooms every night on TV as we see a record number of migrants crossing. Democratic mayors are saying that they need a breather from the busloads that are showing up. So my question to both of you, I'm going to start with you, Congressman. What can be done in the short term to address the issue that many believe also has national security implications?
Sure. Well,
and further out, how do we improve the process overall?
Let me start with this. Most of you in this room, not all, but most of you in this room had foremothers and forefathers that came to this country for the same reason that mine did. In my case, a Jewish family escaping pogroms in Eastern Europe in the late 19th century. But this country is about immigration. We must remain that way. We must welcome and promote and encourage the best and brightest around the world, people who want to pursue the American dream. I'm a Democrat who will tell you, having been to the southern border twice, it is an unmitigated, shameful, inexcusable disaster. And it is a national security issue. The foremost priority of an American president is to keep this country secure. We spend $1 trillion a year on our military, and yet tens of thousands of people per day are approaching our border because our asylum law is so ridiculous. A failure of Democrats and Republicans for generations. Under my presidency, we will have border security, northern border and southern border. Most importantly, a humane immigration policy that welcomes new Americans and changes the asylum policy so that people declare asylum, have it adjudicated in their country of origin, and save the $10,000 that they are spending now with Mexican cartels to bring them across the border. That's how the United States should operate.
Same question for you, ma'am, the immigration.
We must deal with the immigration problem on the level of both symptom and cause. On the level of symptom, Congress has failed us miserably, not just presidents. We need to have the proper infrastructure so that people can be interviewed for asylum. If they have the establishment of credible fear, then of course they are moved on to their next step, getting into integration into American society. If not, they must go home to their country of origin. But no wall is going to fix this. No surveillance system is going to fix this. We need to address root causes. Why are so many people in such desperate straits that they're trying to get here? U.S. foreign policy is involved. There are two main categories, economic devastation, and America needs to admit to itself how much our own policies in Latin America over the last few decades contributed mightily to the destabilization of so many of those economies. We have to be willing to help restabilize. We need to, above all, we need to remove the sanctions in Venezuela and the sanctions in Cuba. Secondly, as Dean mentioned, people are seeking to escape the violence of the drug cartels. The United States of America needs to end the war on drugs. This is not helping at the southern border. It will actually help at the southern border to remove the black market that these drug cartels depend on. As president, I will, not only on this issue, but on many issues, not just address symptoms in a transactional way, but address root causes in a transformational way.
Next question follows up on that. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it, please. For a number of years now, polls indicate the number one public health and safety issue Granite Staters are facing is the crisis of addiction. Certainly New Hampshire's not alone. Fentanyl, though, surpassing numbers of those lost in Vietnam overall. It's a real problem. Again, Ms. Williamson, to you, do you think we're nearing a point where a public health emergency needs to be declared along the lines of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Whether we declare it or not, drug addiction is a public health emergency, and that is the way we need to treat it. We need to stop treating drug addiction as a criminal issue. We need to treat it as a health issue. Most addicts want to get sober. We have spent $1 trillion since 1971, the beginning of the drug war, which was bogus to begin with, and Richard Nixon knew that. It has not in any way solved the problem. It has exacerbated it. Among other things, 46% of our federal prisoners are nonviolent drug offenders. They should be home with their children. For the $100 billion that we spend now on the drug war, we can have a world-class network of recovery options. Many presidents have a drug czar. I want to have a recovery czar. I want to bring recovery, getting people back their lives on the issue of addiction as on everything else in order that we can begin again. That will, by the way, release the energy, the resources, and the bandwidth that we need to go after the one that's the real problem, and that is fentanyl.
Thank you, ma'am. Congressman?
Well, of course we have an addiction problem in this country because we have economic despair, we have hopelessness, we have anger, disenfranchisement, oppression. It's part of the human condition, and prohibition usually never works. We're also a country that spends $1 trillion a year, back again, to the military budget. And yet we're suffering the loss of 100,000 Americans to addiction overdoses, 50,000 to gun violence. And yet we're dedicating all this money overseas to protecting our country. Why don't we start protecting ourselves? A mental and emotional health care system, a system of not just treatment, as Marianne said, but recovery. We underinvest. And then we don't find paths to success afterwards. This is about being a compassionate country, a country that cares, but most importantly, a country that solves problems. And as a member of Congress for 3 terms, let me tell you, the dysfunction is obscene. All predicated on the fact that the entire culture is predicated on returning to your seat in Congress, not solving problems. There's no reward for it. That's the only reason I've torpedoed my career, to step out of that nonsense, lead the country as its executive, and tell you the truth, saying the quiet part out loud.
Thank you, sir. Next question goes back to you. Yesterday, a Biden campaign official indicated that if he wins a second term, top priority will be abortion. What's your top priority if you win?
My top priority...
I'm sorry, Congressman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
Well, let me start by saying I'm 150% pro-choice. I believe in freedom, I believe in liberty, I believe government should have nothing to do with what a woman does with her body, particularly men, period. With that said, it is a very important issue. And by the way, Democrats should have codified reproductive rights into law when we had the chance in past years. That's the beginning. Under my presidency, that will be done. But economic despair, costs are out of control, people cannot afford their lives, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, 40% cannot afford a $400 emergency. That is why Joe Biden is losing and will lose to Donald Trump. He is not listening to what is going on in America. It's not about GDP growth. Most of that accrues to the 1% of Americans who have 32% of the wealth. People cannot afford their lives. I want every one of you in this room to live the American dream, and that's why under my administration, that is job 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. Same question for you, ma'am. Sorry, we're going back and forth.
We were talking about abortion was the original
Talking about
question.
abortion, but that's, Joe Biden said that was going to be his top priority, a campaign official. What will your top priority be?
My top priority, the first thing I will do is to cancel the Willow Project. The next thing I will do is to cancel every contract that the U.S. government has with union-busting companies. Next thing I will do is I will audit every cent of the Pentagon, and I assume that they will lose it again, that they will fail in that audit. Next thing I will do is I will call together the nation's greatest experts on early childhood. I want to establish a Department of Children and Youth. The 90% of a child's brain is developed in the first 5 years. If we want this country to be thriving in 20 years, we need to give a lot more attention to 10-year-olds today. I will also, during that beginning phase of my presidency, I will be establishing a Department of Peace. We need to be as sophisticated and as organized in the ways we wage peace to prevent war as we are sophisticated and organized in the ways of waging war when we feel we must. We will have a peace academy as well as a military academy. We will have an army of peace builders as well as an army of military personnel, so that both cities in America as well as cities where we have influence around the world, we will help to wage peace and declare peace and save human civilization for future generations.
Quick follow-up. I got to know, what does a peace academy look like?
Well, peace building actually is a real thing. There are 4 factors which, when present, statistically indicate there will be a higher incidence of peace and a lower incidence of violence. None of these will surprise you. Number 1, greater economic opportunities for women.
Quickly.
Number 2, greater educational opportunities for children. Number 3, a reduction of violence against women. And number 4, a reduction in unnecessary human despair. When those elements are present, what you have is for people who are thriving. When people are thriving, there is greater peace. Large groups of desperate people are a national security risk. They form a petri dish out of which all manner of personal and societal dysfunction arises almost inevitably, including vulnerability to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic
And Josh,
forces.
Thank you.
If I could respond quickly.
Follow-ups. Try to keep it to about 30 seconds. And of
Yeah,
course,
just 30
go ahead.
seconds. And I admire that, and investing in peace, because Americans in the world are sick of war. We all know that. When I'm president, I'm going to do something quite different. I'm going to have a team of rivals in the White House, just like Abraham Lincoln did. I will have a bipartisan cabinet so that every American knows that their voice is heard in the White House. Probably equally important to all of you in this room, I will have the country's first youth cabinet, a college or high school student from every one of our 50 states who meet on a quarterly basis with me as president to share your perspectives on AI, social media regulation, climate change, gun violence prevention. You've got better ideas than the lobbyists, from whom I don't take any money, by the way, so come visit me in Washington.
All right, thank you, sir. Let's shift to foreign policy now. Plenty there to talk about, right? Ms. Williamson, how would your administration handle Russia's invasion of Ukraine in contrast to how the Biden administration has handled it?
Well, first of all, the United States does not have clean hands when it comes to how we dealt with NATO in the run-up to the invasion and our Aegis missiles in Poland and elsewhere. However, none of that justifies the atrocious behavior of Vladimir Putin. For that reason, the fact that I do feel that the United States needs to take a stand, that people such as Vladimir Putin we do not need them thinking they can just grab a piece of a country as they want to. At the beginning, I was with President Biden on this. Where I was not with him was on the line for as long as it takes. There has always had to be a negotiated settlement. We were all hoping that the counteroffensive staged by the Ukrainians would work, that it would push back the Russians. It hasn't. So that now we're in a stalemate. Now we're in a war of attrition. I do believe that it's time. There is no guarantee that if we continue with this, that Ukraine will do better. There is no guarantee of that. Vladimir Putin said that he wants to talk, and when I am president, I will receive military analysis that no civilian has. If I receive the military analysis that leads me to believe that what I just said is 100% true, I will be open to a conversation with Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you agree with her, sir?
Well, I agree that everything we're going to talk about today should have been solved upstream. We could have prevented so many of the problems we're facing right now, both domestically and overseas. In 2014, when Joe Biden was vice president, he let Putin walk right into Crimea and took it with impunity. Nothing to prevent it, nothing to do anything about it. And what does Putin do? We all know this. He takes an inch, he waits, and if no response, then he'll take a mile. This was all predictable. All predictable. So the answer is it should have been prevented years ago, but here we are now. And yes, we should help Ukraine defend itself, because he is a tyrant, he is a disaster, and he is a very dangerous man. This is the most important part. My dad died in Vietnam. It was an unnecessary, sickening war. But the world then saw the United States gave up, because it was a bad decision to begin with. They saw us exit Afghanistan in a total chaotic mess. And if we exit our support from Ukraine right now, mark my words, our adversaries around the world are watching. And if they see the United States once again fold, if they see us fold, we're in big trouble. So I wish this had never happened. I wish we were not spending tens of billions of dollars again litigating a war when we should be investing in American people and all of you in this room. That's why I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm the ranking member of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia Subcommittee, because this is the most important investment of our lifetimes, to make sure that we have peace around the world.
Stay with you, Congressman. Perhaps even more complex situation involving Hamas, Israel, Palestinians. How would your administration be different from the president's?
Well, look, I respect Joe Biden, but he's been in Washington for 50 years. He is part of a generation of people in Washington who've done nothing else but serve in Washington. And they're looking at this crisis in the Middle East the same way after Israel was founded, the same bloodshed, the same cycle of violence for 75 years. And that's why I'm saying it's time for change. We need new leaders from the West Bank to the West Wing. And I think that's really important. I deeply love Israel. I'm a Jewish man. My family escaped pogroms. The Holocaust was real. And Jewish people need a place of refuge, because when they came to the United States during the Holocaust, we were turned away. There needs to be a Jewish state. Benjamin Netanyahu is not a good man. The settlement policy, a disgusting policy. His cabinet, awful. But Hamas has got to be destroyed. They are keeping 8 American hostages right now, my friends. Every morning and every night, the United States president should be referring to the 8 Americans being held by this terrorist organization. As the first Jewish president in America, I will sign documents supporting and recognizing a Palestinian state, because we need 2 states. We need peace and prosperity for the Jewish people in Israel and Palestinian people in Palestine. Under my presidency, we will get it done.
Thank you, sir. Same question for you on Israel-Palestine.
I agree with everything that Dean said. We need to have an immediate ceasefire. And I called for this ceasefire before it even began. We do need a full release of those hostages. Remember, some of those hostages are American, by the way. I will find out, is there a way that there is any behavior, any action on the part of the United States that could bring them home? And also, then, as Dean said, we need to get immediately to the architecture for a 2-state solution. It is absolutely the only solution.
Thank you very much. If you guys want to take a quick sip of water, I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors that college convention wouldn't be possible without, and that's AARP. Thank you very much, ma'am. And the next question does come from AARP, starting with you, Marianne Williamson. If lawmakers don't take action to protect and save Social Security over the next 10 years, Social Security could be cut by 20%, an average of $4,000 a year. This is a program that workers rely on when they retire or become disabled, and it's also important to families when a worker passes away. As president, what will you do to protect Social Security for Americans 50 plus, their children, their grandchildren, and so on?
We should lift the cap to $250,000. Then also, remember, our seniors, half of our seniors are living on less than $25,000 a year. For everyone who is over 65 and older, there should be, if your Social Security does not get to the level of $1,200, you will be at the level of $1,200. This is particularly an issue for older women, because many women didn't pay into Social Security. Their work was unearned, unpaid labor. It was raising children. It was taking care of homes. So every senior should receive that $1,200. And that is how we will not only save Social Security, but it's also how we will save the dignity and the lives and the well-being of our elders.
Thank you very much. Same question for you, sir.
Well, Social Security is the most successful anti-poverty program in human history, and it is not one that we can let go under. We might make sure that it's solvent, and that, as you just said, Josh, it will be reducing benefits by 25% in the 2030s, coming up soon, if we don't do something, because we've had such demographic shifts in America. How do we solve it? Just like Marianne said, we have a very regressive tax right now in place, a cap of about $160,000 a year, meaning if you make $200,000, you're paying a lot less in Social Security percentage than someone making $160,000. We should move the cap to $250,000. That will extend the program through the 2040s. And then, as I just said earlier in this debate, I want to establish a mechanism to make Americans philanthropists. There are millions of Americans who have been successful, do not need their Social Security. If they knew they could dedicate their annual Social Security to a pool that would be redistributed to the lowest 10% of recipients, that would make a meaningful difference in the lives of millions of retirees and give them dignity. That should be the promise of America.
Okay, our next question comes from a college student. You're smiling there. This one, we're going to start with you on this one, Congressman. Take it away, man.
Hi, so my name is Olivia Brimmer. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a senior political science student at New England College. Most candidates that have visited NEC have mentioned the rising cost of college and the increase in student debt. So my question is, how, as president, how would you address this rising cost, and how would you fund that initiative?
Mm-hmm. So, Olivia, first and foremost, we should be a nation that ensures that young people who have an interest in higher education to pursue their American dream can do so without being burdened by debt. $1.7 trillion, $90 billion a year in interest, it is obscene. If we are a country of freedom and liberty and capitalism, we should be investing in education, not tormenting and burdening people with extraordinary amounts of debt. Near term, I'd like to absolve the debt of anybody who has it and is willing to pursue a career in some type of public service by serving our country somehow. I think we should start with that. How to pay for college to make sure no one has to? I would take the top 15 endowments of the top universities in America have $326 billion. What should we do? It's time for an excise tax, the Ivy League excise tax. That alone can help pay for college for everybody because the aggregation of that money is obscene, absurd, and it has got to be shared.
College affordability. Please, keep your...
I like the idea of that excise tax, but let's look at the larger picture here. We should be setting our young people up to win, not cutting them off at their knees. How predatory is that we have turned the desperation of young people to simply self-actualize and better their lives into a profit center? Before the 1970s, there was a tuition-free and near tuition-free system in this country. It was in Florida, University of Texas, University of California. And then this ugly unholy economic alliance between banks and lending companies and an educational institution and the government in order to create these loans. It is predatory. It is preying on our young people. That's why I will use the Higher Education Act to get rid of them completely. How many of our young people would love nothing more than a $2,500 discretionary expenditure? We have kids who are coming out of college so loaded, and by the way, when I was in, debt is crippling no matter how old you are. But to be in your 20s carrying tens of thousands of dollars of college loan debt, this country should be ashamed of itself. And how do we pay for it? In other countries, what they do is this. You go as high as your achievement level will take you. Then later, when the government can see on your taxes that you are beginning to make, you're doing fine, and that money can start being paid back to the government without impacting your quality of life, then the government starts paying itself back. This is one of the most egregious transgressions of the U.S. government on parts of the population of the United States.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shame on us for doing this to our young.
Listen, I appreciate the applause and I appreciate the enthusiasm you guys have for the candidates, but to make sure they can hear me and each other, please hold it until the end. Plus, we have a lot of microphones in here, and this is being broadcast all over the world. Thank you. I can't help but notice you guys agree on a lot of different things, and I'm not trying to start a food fight.
And we're not trying to what?
I'm not trying to start a food fight. So, but you do have to show contrast. Ma'am, we'll start with you. Why are you the person that can beat Joe Biden and then win the presidency?
We are not going to win the presidency by warning people about Donald Trump. People who like Donald Trump, they're going to vote for Donald Trump. The way we're going to win in 2024, first of all, let me tell you what the danger is for Democrats. The danger for Democrats is not people voting for Donald Trump. We could indict him 91 more times. They're going to vote for Donald Trump. The danger is people staying home. The danger is people staying home if the Democratic Party does not become once again unequivocal advocates for the working people of the United States. I'm the one because I'm going to offer people a better life, an economic U-turn, a new beginning, a way to actually make your life better. Someone who's, Congress has been the problem. They would say that only those who know how to be part of that system that drove us into this ditch should possibly be considered qualified to lead us out of this ditch. But the problem is not that we don't have enough political car mechanics in Washington. The problem is that we're on the wrong road. I'm the one to offer to people what I have done for the last 40 years. I have worked with people in times of crisis and despair, and the American people are in a time of constant crisis today and constant despair. I know about helping people endure a time of crisis and transform a time of crisis by saying the truth. The truth is that short-term profit maximization for huge corporations is now the bottom line. It now supersedes humanitarian values. It supersedes the safety, the health, and the well-being of the American people. In me, you'd have a president who says it like it is, lays it down like it is, and does something about it, and it's not just talk.
Don't do it. Hold it. I appreciate it. We try to keep it around a minute. Take as much time as you like on this, sir.
I believe I'm the type of president our country needs, and that is because I am dedicated to repairing this country, to celebrating people of all races, religions, politics, geographies. I'm disgusted by both parties having divided this nation. Angertainment would have us actually believe we're more divided than we really are. There's a reason I'm the second most bipartisan member out of 585 elected officials in Washington and our governors. I care deeply. I will wake up every single morning trying to repair our country. I also have unusual experience. I've built companies. I've been working in the private sector almost my whole life. I was the board chair of a health system. I was a regent at a university. I chaired the board of a philanthropic foundation. So I know the nonprofit world. And now I'm a third-term member of Congress. I have seen everything. And I see why things are not working in Washington. Why did Donald Trump win? A lot of people like the fact he was a businessman, but he gave business people like me a bad name. I've never declared bankruptcy. I've never had my philanthropy shut down because of unethical behavior in New York. I've not been indicted 4 times. My goodness, everybody. I can bring this country together. I have business experience. I attract independents. I flipped a district that had been red for 60 years. 60 years.